Roald Gundersen is an area architect who grew up in La Crosse and spent much of his time as a kid at his grandparents' in Ebner Cooley, with the Bluffs as his backyard. The outdoors were a major influence for his sustainable building practices. Some of his most notable works are the Hannafal Market in Cameron Park and the new bandshell, covering the historic bandstand in Riverside Park. Listen to Roald as he explores his childhood, building process, and collaborative approach to architecture. I'm Amy, he's Brent, and this is La Crosse Local.
Tell us your origin story. Where did you grow up and how did this shape your eventual path in sustainable building?
Well, I grew up in La Crosse, Ebner Cooley. My grandparents had a farm up there. So I had the Bluffs as my backyard. And I think that really influenced the direction of my life in a lot of ways. We had a lot of room to play outdoors, go on hikes, to climb the bluffs. Really, I built forts, so many forts. And I think in some ways I'm just continued that, except obviously to code and structurally engineered. But that whole engagement in that environment of La Crosse was really fundamental in shaping what I've done with my life, I would say. And I went on in University of Minnesota, architecture school, but also the College of Design up there in Minneapolis. And then really got exposed to some world-class projects out west. Cathedral restoration in San Jose, California, Biosphere 2, which there's just recently been a documentary on.
Related to, some of the structures you've done, I think there's people have actually participated in a lot of your pieces. One that comes to mind is Hannafal Market in Cameron Park, where hundreds, if not thousands of people show up every Friday and Saturday. How did that Hannafal Market come about? And how do you feel now with the community that's down at Cameron Park Farmers Market?
That was from a passion of, again, my grandparents grew some of the best food that I remembered as a child growing up in their gardens. And when I came back here, I was having just worked on Biosphere 2. I really wanted to create what I viewed as the new barn, which was a greenhouse, a solar greenhouse, so people could extend their season and grow food. I was really into solar energy and using locally sourced materials. So my clients were really farmers to begin with when I moved back here. But part of that was to create the infrastructure to support the farmers and their marketing of their produce. And Cameron Park was recently sort of rediscovered, not only because the co-op had moved downtown, and I saw the Cameron Park as being the natural location for a farmer's market infrastructure and the organization that would support the growers so that they weren't competing against truck farmers where they would go buy wholesale and then sell at the farmer's market. We finally got that through, and the first market opened in 2001. Cameron Park was actually a member of my distant family. That was the first park in the city. And across the street from there was Market Square. And that was where events were held, community events, what is now the parking ramp and housing. And so that place had been the place that circuses, when they came to town, they would set up. And that was where Roosevelt spoke, Teddy Roosevelt, on that square. So that's a long story, but it gets back to really ultimately being supported by the community at large. And I think for me has been one of the most satisfactory projects that I've worked on. And so it's really the public square that La Crosse really did not have anymore, and now has the living room for a public marketplace. Paul Hannafal and his family, his parents who sold plants at farmers markets. And so that was an appropriate project for them to kick in a substantial part of the canopy cost. And the city, which was already planning streetscape improvements, was happy to provide the water, power, and the base supports for the canopy. So another partnership between private and public interests really resulted in what I think is a very successful project that hopefully will continue for decades to come.
Just from my own experience visiting some of your smaller greenhouses to homes to different outbuildings and even to major projects, I think the example is the new Festo Foods in Madison, Wisconsin. Kind of touched on it a little bit, but what has been your favorite building or structure and what gets you excited about it?
Well, I think most architects would claim their last building, their last project as being their favorite. And certainly the bandshell is important for me personally, and I hope the community as well. However, I think they fall into two groups, and I would characterize the houses and the greenhouses as not only experimental design projects, but also very much representative of the pragmatism of this country. And I think that for me is one group or tranche of buildings types, which is really, I consider it the blue jeans, the VW bug, the design from the standpoint of as if people really mattered. So making houses that are durable, but perhaps of very modest expense. Most architects work for wealthy people and wealthy concerns. And I really admire those that have been able to develop projects that really address the needs of people of more modest needs. I was looking at it also from the perspective of what does the forest need? And the forest needs us to engage with it in a way, I believe, that would also support our own building of cities. And so many of the projects I've worked on have trended towards more urban environments now. And I think the bandshell represents that, and so does Festival Foods. The bandshell falls into the other group, which is really art-based, where the building is more of an esoteric, beautiful structure. It's about creating an iconic piece that really represents more of a symbol of the community. So those two directions in my career, they run parallel, but they serve for me very different purposes in terms of how I feel about engaging in architecture.
You know, this is a major collaborative effort, different groups. Currently, or just most recently, I believe, been working with lacrosse-based arts and entertainment organizations to get this bandshell completed in Riverside Park down by the river. Could you tell us the story of that design and the process? I mean, it's come together rather quickly, hasn't it?
It has. 2 years ago, I received the commission, in effect, after responding to what is called a request for proposal, that the group that was led by Terry Bauer and Dave Clements and Pat Stevens, those three, and then also a group of other stalwart folks that showed up at meetings and took interest in seeing this forward. Those folks wanted to have a cover, a roof, first and foremost, and then also secondarily an acoustic structure so that they could have an enhanced experience of performing music up there for the community. I had suggested the same sort of path be taken as with the Cameron Park Market, where the Bandshell Coalition would form and gift a structure, the canopy, to the city. And so I was very excited to receive this commission. And of course, it's a major engineering piece. And there were many pitfalls along the way, because with a community project and really the living room of the city, and we're creating something that is covering a historic structure, we had to go through many approval meetings, not only through parks, but also through the Historic Heritage Commission, as well as the DNR and FEMA, and really on and on. There were a lot of people that wanted to weigh in on whether this should be built there. And the coalition really made it clear that they wanted a permanent structure that would be there for a long time. That would be an iconic structure, and my design fit their bill.
Can you talk about the design a little bit, about how it kind of lays out in the park? And
Sure. So I ran across a sketchbook that it had on it a little sketch of the then just recently completed arched bridge. And those two bridges together were rapidly becoming sort of the symbol of the city, because they're unique. They create a sense of place. You know where you are. The arches and the uprights could be repeated in form to create a canopy, and in effect sort of an architectural fugue. So the trees, the branching columns are the trestle design of the original La Crosse Mississippi River Bridge, and the arches of the roof are the new bridge. It also, to me, looked like the curves of a fish and of the waves of a river, as well as the sort of the eye of the spectator watching and listening to the music. Perhaps also the wings of a bird, like the eagle. So with architecture, you have to be careful with what your intent is symbolically. It's really important to allow the interpretation to be developed by each person as they come to that place. Hopefully engender qualities and meaning that is positive and reinforces the aspirations of the community. And I think lacrosse has shown that it really has come to appreciate its river and its bluffs and its place and along the Mississippi River.
Lacrosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at Lacrosse Locals. Subscribe to the Lacrosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.